Yes, please.
Okay, Tarika.
Yes.
Go.
Okay.
Yeah.
But on that which as yet we know not how we shall concentrate, and yet we cannot know the divine unless we have achieved this concentration of our being upon Him, a concentration which culminates in a living realization and the constant sense of the presence of the One in ourselves and in all of which we are aware, is what we mean in yoga by knowledge and the effort after knowledge. It is not enough to devote ourselves by the reading of scriptures or by the stress of philosophical reasoning to an intellectual understanding of the divine. For at the end of our long mental labor, we might know all that has been said of the eternal, possess all that can be thought about the infinite, and yet we might not know him at all. This intellectual preparation can indeed be the first stage in a powerful yoga, but it is not indispensable. It is not a step which all need or can be called upon to take. Yoga would be impossible, except for a very few, if the intellectual figure of knowledge arrived at by the speculative or meditative reason were its indispensable condition or a binding preliminary. All that the light from above asks of us that it may begin its work is a call from the soul and a sufficient point of support in the mind. This support can be reached through an insistent idea of the divine in the thought, a corresponding will in the dynamic parts, an aspiration, a faith, a need in the heart. Any one of these may lead or predominate if all cannot move in unison or in an equal rhythm. The idea may be and must in the beginning be inadequate. The aspiration may be narrow and imperfect, the faith poorly illumined or even as not surely founded on the rock of knowledge, fluctuating, uncertain, easily diminished. Often even it may be extinguished and need to be lit again with difficulty, like a torch in a windy path. But if once there is a resolute self consecration from deep within, if there is an awakening to the soul's call, these inadequate things can be a sufficient instrument for the divine purpose. Therefore, the wise have always been unwilling to limit man's avenues towards God. They would not shut against his entry even the narrowest portal, the lowest and darkest postern, the humblest wicket gate. Any name, any form, any symbol, any offering has to be held to be sufficient if there is the consecration along with it. For the divine knows himself in the heart of the seeker and accepts the sacrifice.
One page para, and he's discussing very interesting things. We'll look at it. There are many things that need to be looked at. Okay, so he has told you that earlier that concentration and self consecration are absolutely necessities for the spiritual life. But there is a problem. When I don't know what the divine is, how can I concentrate on him? So the answer is very simple. Whatever your concept, whether it be thought or whether it be heart or whether it be will, you can start with any. And when you start, obviously it's going to be defective. But if it is sufficiently strong, slowly, the defective parts of your understanding of the divine will disappear and you will get a clearer picture of what the divine is. So this is something like the chicken and egg situation. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? So this is something impossible to understand at our physical level. You can't solve the problem because you can't have a chicken without the egg and you can't have an egg without the chicken. So, but the answer to that is start with whatever you want, whether you want to start with the egg or the chicken or whatever your concept of the divine, it will ultimately correct itself if you are sufficiently sincere about it. That's what he said. We'll read each sentence and then we'll. And by the way, this is this what Srivastava is discussing it towards the end, especially, it is something unique to Hinduism. Okay, God is never shut out in Hinduism. Anyone and everybody is willing, and in any way you want, you can join. This is not so at all in the other religions. No other religion says this very clearly. Christianity says very clearly you have to necessarily go through Christ. Other than that, you cannot. You cannot reach the divine without going through Christ. Number one. Number two, Islam also same thing. If you don't believe in Allah, then all you deserve is death. You have to cut off your neck and remove you from existence. Even the Jewish religion also is very narrow, okay? But it's the Hindu bunch of religions, whether it be Vaishnavism, Shaivism, whether it be Advaita, or whether it be Jainism or Sikhism, they are all open, okay? They all accept each other. So this is something unique to India. And this is what appeals to most people when they turn away from...
Wrong.
Tell me. Yeah?
No.
What are called Abrahamic religions. Okay? The Abrahamic religions are Islam and Christianity. Okay? So when they turn away, this aspect of Hinduism is very, very appealing to everybody. It's open. There's no restriction at all. You don't have to, like one of the religious leaders says, in India there is no belief system. You have to believe this? No, not at all. You don't have to believe anything. You start with your individual conviction and you will reach the divine. It's absolutely open. Okay? So this comes towards the end of the para and we'll come to that. So now I read each sentence, all right? But on that which as yet we know not, how shall we concentrate? And yet we cannot know the divine unless we have achieved this concentration of our being upon him. A concentration which culminates in a living realization and a constant sense of the presence of the one in ourselves and in all of which we are aware is what we mean in yoga by knowledge and the effort after knowledge. Remember, he is discussing here in this whole section, he is discussing only Jnana Yoga. Okay, it goes on for 100, 200 or 250 pages or so. Then he starts other yogas. Okay, but here is he is talking about the Jnana Yoga here. Then he says, a concentration which culminates in a living realization. Okay, it's not an idea in the mind. It's not. It is something living. You feel it in your bones. Okay, and the constant sense of the presence of the one in ourselves and in all. So there are many who feel the presence in their own heart. Oh, the divine is there with me. I can feel him, his presence, he is guiding me. There can't be any mistake about it. Or you see the divine in the physical world, okay? You see the divine in the physical world. You see, that's what is called, what is it called? The feeling of the pantheism. It's called pantheism. Seeing the divine everywhere in the outside world. Okay. But pantheism also narrow because they say that you can't experience in any other way except this. So there are three ways of experiencing the divine. The transcendental, which is normally the path of Jnana Yoga. You see the divine outside yourself, not in the universe. Or you can see him within yourself, which is the Bhakti Yoga path. And you can see him also in the universe, which is the pantheistic way of seeing. So Srivastava wants you to realize the divine in all the three ways. So,
Rangada, if we see the divine in ourselves, then, can't we recognize him in others?
Usually not.
Okay.
But you can't make a rule out of it. But usually not. You are so satisfied with something that you don't even examine the other possibilities. That's the thing. Okay. Usually not. But that doesn't mean to say that is absolutely a rule. No, of course not. If it was a rule, then Srivastava would not say that you have to experience in all the three ways. The crux of the thing is that you are so unbelievably satisfied with your experience that you don't look for anything else. Whether it be transcendental or whether it be in yourself or whether it be in the universe. It is so satisfying. Yeah, that's the whole thing. So then he says that this is what is meant by yoga, to see in yourself or in the universe after the effort. Now he says something very interesting, which is categorical. It is not enough to devote ourselves by reading of scriptures or by the stress of philosophical reasoning to an intellectual understanding of the divine. Understanding the divine in the mind is very good. There is no problem about it. But you can't say that you have realized the divine. For the end of our long mental labor, we might know all that has been said of the eternal, possess all that can be thought about the infinite, and yet we might not know him at all because there's no experience. So this is very clearly, it says, experience, not mental knowledge. Mental knowledge can certainly help, but experience is the first. You have to see him, feel him with your very bones, with your very body. This intellectual preparation can indeed be the first stage in a powerful yoga. If you have an understanding of the divine mentally, it certainly helps. There's no doubt about it. But it is not indispensable. Because if it was indispensable, how would Raman Maharshi, who was illiterate, Raman Maharshi was not illiterate. Ramakrishna was almost illiterate. Okay? He could write Bengali, but he was almost, not educated. Raman Maharshi also was educated only after the age of 16 in the American college in Madurai. But after that, he left. You can't say that you complete your education by the age of 16 unless you are a Shankara. Unbelievable. This is actually a historical fact. He finished his whole education when he was 6 years old. Okay? If you feel that this is nonsense, look at some of the videos today. Some of these children, what amount of mental knowledge they have. It's unbelievable. There are children who know all the countries, 190 countries in the world with their capitals and their national flags. Impossible for a human being to know that. So it's not absolutely impossible to understand that Shankara finished his education at the age of 6. Really. Okay. So if that were so, mental knowledge was essential. Ramakrishna would never have realized, Raman Maharshi would never have realized. Okay. So obviously those who are illiterate, they cannot realize the divine? No, that's not possible. So mental knowledge is very useful but not essential, so they say. Not indispensable. It is not a step which all need or can be called upon to take. Yoga would be impossible except for very few if the intellectual figure of knowledge arrived at by the speculative or meditative reason were its indispensable condition or a binding preliminary. It is not a binding preliminary. All that the light asks from above, all the light from above asks of us that it may begin its work is a call from the soul and a sufficient point of support in the mind. So this is very interesting. As you approach the divine, so the divine gives himself to you. One must be very careful when you say this, because then you may say, oh, divine is being very commercial. Whatever you give me, I'll give you back that much. It's not like that. It is when you give yourself to the divine, you are opening your gates. When you are opening your gates, it depends on how open your gate is. He can't give you more than that. So that is what is meant by this phrase. That as you approach the divine, so the divine pours himself into you. Okay. He is always ready. And a call from the soul or a sufficient point of support in the mind. Then you start your yoga. In fact, sufficient support of mind is not there in the Bhakti Yoga also. But in Sri Aurobindo Yoga, he says that we start our yoga from the mind. Okay. Other yoga start from elsewhere. For instance, say, Hatha Yoga starts in the body. Okay. Then the Raj Yoga starts with the morality. It goes into Yama, Niyama, then Asanas, physical, then Pranayama, vital. And then it comes to the mind. But Sri Aurobindo starts his yoga with the mind. He says we start with the mind. So that's the speciality of the integral yoga. You start with the support of the mind. Okay, but it is not essential. This support can be reached. How mental support can be reached, he is telling you. This support can be reached through an insistent idea of the divine in the thought, a corresponding will in the dynamic parts. The dynamic parts is your vital parts. Okay, dynamic means necessarily full of action. Okay, energy, strength, and that is a vital. An aspiration, a faith, a need in the heart. The higher vital, you can aspire from there, and you need to have a faith. I will not fail, the divine will not fail me. Okay? A need in the heart. Any one of these may lead or predominate if all cannot move in unison or in an equal rhythm. Unison, the word means in perfect harmony. When you sing all, they must all be in the same pitch. So that's unison. So your mind, your heart, and your will, if it is in unison, it is wonderful. But usually it is not. No? One part predominates. So says it doesn't matter. The idea may be and must be in the beginning inadequate. In the beginning, be inadequate. How? We don't know. We are in ignorance. So we don't know the divine. You have to start with ignorance only. Aspiration may be narrow and imperfect. The faith poorly illumined, or even as not surely founded on the rock of knowledge, fluctuating, uncertain, easily diminished. This is what happens all the time. Okay, I'll tell you something that Nirodha wrote to Sri Aurobindo and how he replied. Often, even it may be extinguished. Complete lack of aspiration also can come, and need to be lit again with difficulty, like a torch in a windy pass. Interesting image he is using. Your torch of aspiration can completely be extinguished, okay? But you have to go on steadily relighting the aspiration, the torch of aspiration. Niruddha is complaining to Sri Aurobindo, okay? He says that nothing is happening, and I have again fallen down. Now there is no aspiration, nothing at all. I don't remember the exact words, but this is basically what he's saying. And Sri Aurobindo says, what rose petal sadhaks you are. Get up, dust yourself, and start walking again. So, any amount of failures should never discourage you. This is also reflected in the Gita. Okay, it says very clearly, Anirvinna chetasa. You have to continue without depression. Sometimes you'll fall, but that doesn't mean to say that it's finished. That's not the end at all. Get up again and start. Get up again and start. This is something so true in everything, na? Even in athletics, even in music. They say riyaz, abhyasa. You have to go on practicing. Those who are good musicians, they go on practicing for hours together. So only after a long time you can become perfect. So here also same thing. Your aspiration fails one day, you shouldn't blame yourself. Oh, I'm not capable. No. Without depression, look why it has happened and again correct yourself and go on. That's what Sri is saying. Okay? It has to be lit again with difficulty in a torch, like a torch in a windy pass. But if once there is a resolute self-consecration from deep within, it shouldn't be only a shallow interest, right? From deep within. If there is an awakening to the soul's call, these inadequate things can be a sufficient instrument for the divine purpose. However weak your aspiration, if it is sincere, it will bear fruit. Okay? Therefore, the wise have always been unwilling to limit man's avenues towards God. You can approach God through 100,000 ways. He is infinite. Why should there be only one door or one path to him? That is absolutely unacceptable. Okay? This is the most wonderful part of the Hinduism. Okay? So everybody has a right to go to God. The doors are never closed. And then he is saying very interesting, he uses words which you look at. Okay. Therefore, the wise have always been unwilling to limit man's avenues towards God. They would not shut against his entry even the narrowest portal, the smallest door, okay? That also you can go through to the divine. The lowest and darkest postern, The postern is the back door of a house. Normally in India, um, the latrine cleaners, the mathur, okay, they are considered to be impure and they should not come through the front door. And they have to come through the back door and take away and clean the toilet and go away. So Srimda is saying even the lowest and darkest postern, okay, and this is the image that Ramakrishna used for Tantra. Okay, Tantra also does exactly that. Tantra says all those things which are forbidden, you can even approach the divine through them by becoming absolutely immune to them. So, but Ramakrishna's description of Tantra was very interesting. Yes, you can go into the house of God, but that's you have to use the dirtiest, the lowest gate, and that's not desirable. So, that is the image being used by Sri Aurobindo also. Lowest and darkest postern. Postern, the western, the back gate. And the humblest wicket gate. Wicket gate, you know, na? Wicket gate is a bamboo door which is built with bamboo and it sort of uh, separates the road from the front garden if you want. That's a wicket gate. So any entry into the divine is acceptable to the Hindu religions and all the religions. There are so many religions and that's why they are all accepted. They are all ways to God. Okay. In fact, in India, we have got all sorts of things which, and even in philosophy also, we give full right to the materialist, who is known as a Charvaka. Okay, when you discuss any philosophy, even the Charvakas are given the right place. Okay, so there is even a sect in, I think, Karnataka somewhere, where they worship Ravana. So even that is accepted in India. You may not agree with it, but you accept it. So, any name, any form, any symbol, any offering has been held to be sufficient if there is a consecration along with it. For the divine knows himself in the heart of the seeker and accepts the sacrifice. So the divine is there in your heart, and when you are appealing to him, he will certainly help you in every way that you will be open to him. That's what Srimad is saying. Now, we go to the next. We have got plenty of time. We go to the next one.
And I will read.
Yes, do that.
But still, the greater and wider the moving idea force behind the consecration, the better for the seeker. His attainment is likely to be fuller and more ample. If we are to attempt an integral yoga, it will be as well to start with an idea of the divine that is itself integral. There should be an aspiration in the heart wide enough for a realization without any narrow limits. Not only should we avoid a sectarian religious outlook, but also all one-sided philosophical conceptions which try to shut up the ineffable in a restricting mental formula. The dynamic conception or impelling sense with which our yoga can best set out would be naturally the idea, the sense of a conscious, all-embracing but all-exceeding infinite. Our uplook must be to a free, all-powerful, perfect, and blissful one, and oneness in which all beings move and live, and through which all can meet and become one. This eternal will, at once personal and impersonal, in his self-revelation and touch upon the soul. He is personal because he is the conscious divine, the infinite person who casts some broken reflection of himself in the myriad divine and undivine personalities of the universe. He is impersonal because he appears to us as an infinite existence, consciousness, and ananda, and because he is the fount, base, and constituent of all existences and all energies, the very material of our being and mind and life and body, our spirit and our matter. The thought concentrating on him must not merely understand in an intellectual form that he exists or conceive of him as an abstraction, a logical necessity. It must become a seeing thought, able to meet him here as the inhabitant in all, realize him in ourselves, watch and take hold on the movement of his forces. He is the one existence. He is the original and universal delight that constitutes all things and exceeds them. He is the one infinite consciousness that composes all consciousnesses and informs all their movements. He is the one illimitable being who sustains all action and experience. His will guides the evolution of things towards their yet unrealized but inevitable aim and plenitude. To him, the heart can consecrate itself, approach him as the supreme beloved, beat and move in him as in a universal sweetness of love and a living sea of delight. For his is the secret joy that supports the soul in all its experiences and maintains even the errant ego in its ordeals, and struggles till all sorrow and suffering shall cease. His is the love and the bliss of the infinite divine lover, who is drawing all things by their own path towards his happy oneness. On him, the will can unalterably fix as the invisible power that guides and fulfills it, and as the source of its strength. In the impersonality, this actuating power is a self-illuming force that contains all results and calmly works until it accomplishes in the personality an all-wise and omnipotent master of the yoga, whom nothing can prevent from leading it to its goal. This is the faith with which the seeker has to begin his seeking and endeavor. For in all his effort here, but most of all in his effort towards the unseen, mental man must perforce proceed by faith. When the realization comes, the faith divinely fulfilled and completed will be transformed into an eternal flame of knowledge.
I think it is Pallavi.
Yes.
Your fan, your mic is so powerful that it is catching the sound of the fan also, I think. See? You switched it off? Oh, you have muted yourself. Okay. No problem. Lisa, by the way, may I ask who read just now?
Tarika.
Huh?
Tarika.
Oh, Tarika read. Okay. Sometimes I can't make out the voice, nah? That's why I asked.
Before that, Nandini had read.
Oh, before that Nandini had read. Okay. Sometimes I can't understand the voice.
Mm.
And I am also deaf, quite deaf. All right. So, shall we have a look at what he's saying? Basically, what he's saying is, he's saying that the divine is everything from top to bottom. Okay, everything. There is nothing else except the divine. This is the Advaita philosophy. The other philosophies don't say that. Okay, they say that there is a light above and a darkness below, and this darkness you have to avoid and go up. Okay, this is what the many religions say. Okay, most of the religions say that. Even Christianity, you have the devil and you have the divine. So, and there is a concept of the Mara. In Buddhism also, you have to avoid the lower. But in Advaita philosophy, they have the courage and the temerity, okay, to say that the divine is everything, even the darkness, even the most what you consider to be the undivine. He has used the word undivine here also. We'll have a look at that. Everything is the divine. There is nothing else except the divine. Okay, so that's basically what he's saying here. So, we read the sentences one by one. But still, the greater and wider the moving idea force behind the consecration, the better for the seeker. He has told you that intellectual understanding is not necessary, it is not indispensable. But if you have it, it's an advantage. That's what he's saying here. Okay? Intellectual understanding certainly helps. That's the reason why there are all the Shastras, okay? All the sacred texts all over the world. They help. They do help. He's not saying don't study them. He's saying if you study and you understand, it helps, definitely. But still the greater and wider the moving idea force, okay, in the mind, idea force behind the consecration, the better for the seeker. His attainment is likely to be fuller and more ample, obviously. If we are to attempt an integral yoga, it will be as well to start with an idea of the divine that is itself integral. That's why in this para, he is explaining to you how the divine is integral. Okay, he is there everywhere. He is there in the mind, he is there in the heart, he is there in in matter, he is there. He is impersonal, he is personal, he is there everywhere, he explains. Okay. Now, so better to start with an idea of the divine as integral. Don't shut him out from anything. He is there even in the stone and the animal. Okay. There should be an aspiration in the heart. What type? Wide. Wide enough for a realization without any narrow limits. Not only should we avoid a sectarian religious outlook, but also all one-sided philosophical conceptions which try to shut up the ineffable in a restricting mental formula. Most religions are guilty of this. Okay, most religions are guilty of this. They say there are always something which say don't do this, don't do that. Okay, so that is the problem. All religions, there are something which you don't do. The advice is not that please go ahead and do it. No, it's not that. But there are restrictions. Okay, so in the beginning, you have to definitely lose your identification with body, mind, life, for instance. Okay, but that doesn't mean to say that the divine is not there. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so they're saying it has to be wide. Sect is approaching the divine or the idea of the divine through only one aspect. A sect is something that narrows itself down to one aspect. So simply saying no, we shouldn't do that. In fact, there are many in the ashram who say, oh, only Sri Aurobindo is right. Okay, Sri Aurobindo is telling you not to do that. I remember one incident of Dilip Kumar Roy, who had a very good friend in an Englishman in Lucknow. Okay, he was a professor. Okay, and he was following a guru, a different guru. So Dilip Kumar Roy tried to bring him to become a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. And when this was referred, he refused. Okay, this gentleman. I forget his name now. He had an Indian name also. He adopted Hindu way, absolutely. I forget the name now. He had an Indian name. So he came to the ashram.
Krishna. Krishna. Are you saying about Krishna Prem? Krishna
Correct.
Prem.
Absolutely right. Krishna Prem. That's right. Because that's right. So he refused. He says, no, you can't change gurus like you change toothbrushes. You have to follow one. Okay. That doesn't mean to say that you are narrow in your ideas or not. But the idea of not changing gurus is something like this. Okay. Suppose I am a student. Okay. I say, okay, I want to do engineering. It's a 5-year course. I start. I do 1 year and I say, no. I want to do medicine. Then I start medicine. After 1 year, I start medicine. And after another 1 year, I say, no. I want to do engineering. I want to do IT. So where is the concentration? That is the reason why you should not change your guru. Follow the line you have selected. And so you may consider it narrow, but at the beginning you have to do that. Okay. So that's what it meant by not changing gurus.
But the example you are, Rangada, the example you are giving is changing the subject, not changing the guru.
That's right. No.
But he is not wanting to change the subject. He is wanting to change the guru, no?
No, the idea
The
behind
path.
Yeah.
The path he wants to change, right?
No, well, if you change the guru, then you are changing the path also.
The
Na?
path also, yes.
That you have to keep in mind.
But you know, you are comparing the guru to a subject.
Okay.
So that is
It's
how,
an
if you
image.
are switching from science to art, then actually science is your guru and you're following science. But now you say, no, I want arts. So you switch over to art, which is the guru now.
Okay. Anyway, the idea is clear. That is the reason why you stick to. But that doesn't mean to say that you don't accept the others. Okay. There are many who say it's not necessary to read anything else. But Srivendra says no. You will see later on. He says that you have to accept all the others, but you follow one with concentration. Okay. Then we go to the next one. So that's why he's saying avoid sectarian religious outlook, but also one-sided philosophical conceptions. Don't think that the divine is only you can approach through Shiva or only through Vishnu. Okay, not like that. Or through Krishna. Okay, keep yourself open to all, but follow what your nature is asking you to do. Not only should we avoid a sectarian religious outlook, but also all one-sided philosophical conceptions which try to shut out the ineffable, that which cannot be put into words, ineffable, in a restricting mental formula. The dynamic conception or impelling sense with which our yoga, okay, note the word our yoga, you have to stress our, integral yoga, can best set out would be naturally the idea, the sense of a conscious, all embracing but all exceeding infinite. Now, that word all exceeding infinite is interesting. The infinite is already infinite, you have to go even beyond the infinite. All exceeding infinite, no limits at all. Our uplook, if you look in the dictionary, you won't find the word uplook, but it's so clear what it means. Constantly look upwards, be positive. Okay? Your uplook must be to a free, all powerful, perfect, and blissful one and oneness in which all beings move and live and through which all can meet and become one. We don't exclude anybody from the divine. This eternal will be at once personal and impersonal. This is a very important distinction because there are many who say the divine is not personal, he is only impersonal. There are planes of consciousness. There is no person. These are Jainism, Buddhism, okay, and they all say that there is no God. There is only the impersonal aspects of consciousness. Even your Sadguru also says that. Okay, even Jiddu Krishnamurti also says that there is no God. It's your fiction of your own imagination. But that's not true. If you go right up to the supramental level or through Bhakti Yoga, you realize the divine as a person with whom you can have relations, you can ask questions, he will guide you, he will have conversation with you. That was Ramakrishna's whole experience. The mother was guiding him in everything and giving him answers, specific answers. So there can be a personal aspect also to the divine. But if you go through Jnana Yoga path, you end up with the impersonal aspect. A plane of consciousness where only knowledge is there, only Ananda is there, freedom is there, peace is there, but no God anywhere. Okay, so now he's saying this eternal will be at once personal and impersonal in his self-revelation and touch upon the soul. He is explaining why he can be personal. He is personal because he is the conscious divine. There is the impersonal is not conscious. It is a vast impersonality. Okay? Like a sea. If you ask questions of the sea, it's not going to answer your questions. It's going to be absolutely calm and quiet and remain absolutely mute, like the Brahmic consciousness. Then no relations at all. Okay. So, he's saying he's person because he's conscious divine. The infinite person who casts some broken reflection of himself in the myriad divine and undivine personalities of the universe. Now see that. He's saying even the undivine personalities, the divine is there in him. Now he's saying impersonal. He is impersonal because he appears to us as an infinite existence, consciousness and ananda. And because he is the fount, base and constituent. The word fount means the source, the origin. The base means the foundation. The source is on top, the base is below, and everything in between them constituent. The constituent of a room is whatever is contained in that room. So he is the highest, he is the lowest, and he is everything in between also. That's what these three words mean. Fount, source, origin, base, the foundation below, and the constituent. All the contents of a room are the constituents. Okay, so the contents of your own body is body, mind, life, your own being. So that is the everything. He is from the top to the bottom. He is the divine. So you can experience him naturally as impersonal, of all existences and all energies. The very material of our being and mind and life and body, our spirit and our matter. He is even your body. He is even the stone. Everything is he. The thought, now he is going to see the thought, the heart and the will. Okay, he is going to talk of the three. The thought, concentrating on him, must not merely understand in an intellectual form that he exists or conceive of him as an abstraction, a logical necessity. It must become a seeing thought. A thought is something not living. It has become a seeing thought. In Sanskrit, the word very often used is pashyanti buddhi. Your buddhi must be able to see actually. Okay? Pashyanti buddhi. Able to meet him here as an inhabitant of all. You see him everywhere. Realize him in ourselves. Watch and meet him as the, where is it gone? And watch and take hold on the movement of his forces. In other words, all the three you can see here. First of all, meet him here in the inhabitant in all, the personal aspect of the divine, individual aspect. Realize him in ourselves. Okay, you see him in yourself. Watch and take hold on the movement of his forces in the universe. He is the, so you have to see him inside yourself and outside in the universe also. He is the one existence. He is the original and universal delight that constitutes all things and exceeds them. He is the one infinite consciousness that composes all consciousnesses and informs all their movements. So, he can be in the thought, he can be in the Ananda also. Okay, so that's what he's saying. He is the one illimitable being who sustains all action and experience. He is the one who is doing everything. Nature is doing everything and the divine is supporting through the nature. This has a reflection in what happened in ashram also. Mother is doing all the work in the departments. All the departments she is creating. But Surendra is there behind supporting. He is there always supporting her. Okay. Then sustains all action. His will guides the evolution of things towards their yet unrealized but inevitable aim and plenitude. This unrealized evolution can be individual as in yoga, or it can also be in universe, in nature. Both are evolutions. Yet unrealized but inevitable aim and plenitude. Everyone is sure to reach the divine at one time or other, and even the universe is moving towards him through evolution. To him, the heart can, now he spoke about the thought. Now he is speaking about the heart. The heart is the higher vital. Okay. To him, the heart can consecrate itself, approach him as the supreme beloved. There you are. Supreme beloved, the personal aspect of the divine. Beat and move in him. Why is he using the word beat? Because he's talking of the heart. The heart beats. Every beat will remind you of the divine. Okay. Beat and move in him as in a universal sweetness of love and a living sea of delight. Note the word living. The sea can be very impersonal. It can be something personal, but this is living. It's full of life. For his is the secret joy that supports the soul in all its experiences and maintains even the errant ego in its ordeals and struggles till all sorrow and suffering shall cease. So, the one who is going wrong Okay, the ego is all the time going wrong, but even the divine is there behind, guiding you. Like a parent who is correcting the wrong actions of his own children. Okay, just like that. And struggles till all sorrow and suffering shall cease. His is the love and bliss of the infinite divine lover who is drawing all things by their own path towards his happy oneness. On him, the will. Now he's talking about the will. He spoke about the thought, he spoke about the heart, and now he's talking about the will. On him, the will can unalterably fix as the invisible power that guides and fulfills it, and as the source of its strength. In the impersonality, this actuating power is a self-illumined force. It's a force, impersonal aspect, okay? But it's a self-illumined. The light is there in itself that contains all results and calmly works until it accomplishes in the personality an all-wise and omnipotent master of the yoga, whom nothing can prevent from leading to its goal. So even if you go through the impersonal aspect of the divine, you will meet the master of the yoga who is guiding the individual. That's what he said. This is the faith with which the seeker has to begin his seeking and endeavor. For in all his effort here, but most of all in his effort towards the unseen, you remember he began with, we don't know who the divine is, but there's a faith that I'm going towards him only, unseen. Mental man must perforce proceed by faith. You have to go by faith. And when the realization comes, that faith, divinely fulfilled and completed, will be transformed into an eternal flame of knowledge. Faith is a blind belief, but it can become a knowledge. You finally see that my faith was justified. Okay? So that's the faith is a very important element in spiritual life. You must know that you will succeed, that divine is guiding you. Okay, we have gone 1 minute beyond the time. So we stop here today and
Yes, Rangada.
yeah.
Merci, Rangada.
Okay, au revoir.
Bonne
everybody.
journée.
Yeah.
Merci.